Speaker.
Claire Curran.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, I've listened very carefully to all of the National Party members speaking on this bill tonight, and it was a very courageous thing to do. But yes, I have listened. I have listened very carefully, and I don't think anyone's in any doubt that every one of them is extremely uncomfortable about voting for this bill. And they've trotted out a whole range of reasons why, and I'm going to address all of those reasons. The member Paul Foster-Bell said in his speech that he strongly believes in open government, and then went on to say a whole lot of reasons why that they didn't like this bill, and was followed up with all the other speakers. So, and the listening carefully was about their support for the bill at this reading. And certainly we were left in no doubt with the ACT member who told us that he was going to put up a whole lot of SOPs at the committee stage that would be about opening up the OIA to all and sundry, including yourself, Mr. Speaker, not bringing you into the debate. So either they are serious about open and transparent government and are swallowing a bit of a dead rat with this bill, and there are some good reasons for them to do that, or they're playing games. They're playing silly games, and their so-called support for open and transparent government and they're doing that at the behest of the silly David Seymour. Paul Foster-Bell also said that the government, apologies to my colleagues, but Paul Foster-Bell, who did make a worthy contribution, did make the point, made the claim that the government has nothing to be ashamed of in regard to open and transparent government. And it is true, Mr. Speaker, that the national government did sign up to the United Nations Convention Against Corruption in December last year, ratified, was a strong step in a direction. And in 2014, New Zealand accepted an invitation to join the Open Government Partnership, which brings with it a requirement to demonstrate how the government will implement transparency, accountability, technology and innovation, and civil society participation in government, all very worthy. It might interest the members in the House tonight and the public listening at home that New Zealand has formally been warned just in the last few months, formally been warned for its lateness in meeting its obligations under that open government partnership. And one of the parts of the which we signed up to was a recommendation on parliamentary transparency, Mr. Speaker, which relates directly to this bill. But that formal warning is directly relevant because we aren't fulfilling our obligations under that. And so therefore, the actions of the National Party tonight in swallowing a dead rat, hopefully that's what they're doing, and voting for this bill at the second reading is because they realise that in this environment, when the eyes of many in the world are actually on New Zealand at the moment, and it's whether or not it is whether we're a tax haven and just how much our commitment is to anti-corruption measures and to transparency measures, that this is an opportunity for the government to show it has a commitment to openness, a real commitment to openness and transparency. And certainly, Mr. Speaker, I hope that that's what this is about, and that it isn't about playing a silly game with the silly David Seymour, who is really showing very little brain tonight in his speech in the House. Certainly, if they had voted against it at the second reading, they would have been going against the advice of the Ministry of Justice, which was very clear in the Select Committee. They said that the bill was consistent with the purposes of the OIA and with the constitutional position of Parliamentary Under-Secretaries as part of the Executive with the ability to exercise delegated ministerial power. This was backed up by the Law Commission and the Law Society, both august organisations whose recommendations should be listened to, and certainly this government hasn't always listened to their recommendations when it comes to legislation. But tonight it appears as if they have. Thirdly, my third point, Mr. Speaker, is that the distinction between this bill is very clear, and the analysis around this bill is very clear about the distinction between the Executive and Parliament and the rest of Parliament. Very, very clear. It's a very simple bill. It makes a very simple change to correct an important anomaly, and I do want to commend my colleague Adrian Rurafe for him bringing this to before the Parliament tonight. There is no hint in this bill that that line should be blurred. There is no slippery slope. This is an anomaly, and it's a clear anomaly, and it's an important. It makes an important distinction, a simple distinction between the role of an Under-Secretary and the role that they play, and how that should be accountable for public scrutiny and accountable under the Official Information Act. And of course, the Ministry of Justice agrees with that, as do other submitters. There is no muddying of the waters with this so-called slippery slope argument that the National Party members seem to be buying into tonight. This is not about MPs, the road to members of Parliament, ordinary members of Parliament becoming accountable under the OIA. This is not about the Speaker's office becoming accountable under the OIA. This is about the Under-Secretaries, which are part of the Executive, even if they are not members of the Executive Council. And that's quite simple, and it's an important principle. So, Mr. Speaker, the future, this is actually important. It's an important, small but important piece of legislation. And what David Seymour has actually done tonight has actually started a trend, a positive trend from our perspective on this side of the House, because he's begun proactively releasing information before the law requires him to. And we support that. This was part of our policy in 2011 and 2014 for the proactive release of information under our open government policy. And of course, the government had no open government policy. The proactive release of information is an important trend. And if we could see other National Party ministers starting that trend and continuing that trend, that would be a good and positive thing. So what David Seymour has started is a very significant change in keeping with the principle of keeping the bastards honest, and we support that. What we do need to do is cement this under a legislative change, a small legislative change. This bill is not about David Seymour as much and all as he would like it to be about him. It's about the role that he currently plays as a Parliamentary Under-Secretary. It's not about his ego in any way, but it is important. And I think that what it's doing tonight is showing a pathway, and with the government's support, it will actually cement that pathway towards true openness and accountability, and towards the release of more information and the accountability of another member of the Executive who currently isn't accountable.
Tim McIndoe.
Kia ora.